Mara Castellano, a 34-year-old lighthouse keeper on the remote island of Saint's End, has spent the last 3 years in self-imposed isolation after a tragedy that shattered her faith and her life. Once a vibrant youth pastor in Seattle, she now lives alone in a desolate lighthouse off the coast of Maine, where she keeps watch over treacherous waters that have claimed dozens of ships. The story begins on the eve of the worst storm in a century, Hurricane Ezekiel. Mara has decided this will be her last night. She's planned to let the storm take her, to simply not fight anymore. She's written her final letters, settled her affairs, and made peace with disappearing into the sea. But that night, as the storm begins to rage, something impossible happens. A man appears at her lighthouse door, drenched, exhausted, and desperate. He says his name is Emmanuel, and his fishing boat capsized in the rising waves. He has nowhere else to go. Mara reluctantly lets him in, annoyed that her final night is now interrupted by a stranger she'll have to keep alive. As the hurricane intensifies over the next 3 days, trapping them together in the lighthouse, Mara begins to notice strange things about Emmanuel. He knows things he shouldn't know. About her past, about the tragedy that brought her here, about the guilt that's been drowning her for 3 years. He speaks in parables and asks questions that cut straight to her soul. His presence is both comforting and unsettling. Through flashbacks woven between the present storm, we learn Mara's devastating secret. 3 years ago, during a youth group camping trip, one of her students, a 16-year-old girl named Sophie, drowned in a lake while Mara was distracted, arguing on the phone with her fiancé about wedding plans. Mara froze during the emergency, paralyzed by shock, and by the time others pulled Sophie from the water, it was too late. The church blamed her. Her fiancé left her. Her faith crumbled. She fled to this lighthouse to punish herself with solitude, believing God had abandoned her, or worse, that she had abandoned God. But Emmanuel begins to unravel everything Mara thought she knew about that day, about herself, and about where God actually was in her darkest moment. The wind had been whispering warnings all day. Mara Castellano stood at the gallery railing of Saint's End Lighthouse, 112 feet above the North Atlantic, watching the sky bruise purple and black. The ocean below churned like a living thing, trying to shake itself awake, and the air tasted of salt and electricity. Hurricane Ezekiel was still 18 hours out, according to the crackling weather radio in her quarters, but the sea always knew before the meteorologists did. She'd lived here long enough to read the ocean's moods. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Long enough to know every groan of the iron staircase, every leak in the lantern room's glass panels, every temperamental switch in the electrical system. Long enough to forget what her own voice sounded like in conversation, as opposed to the clipped weather reports she transmitted twice daily to the Coast Guard station in Portsmouth. Long enough to become a ghost. Mara gripped the cold metal railing and closed her eyes, letting the wind whip her dark hair across her face. Somewhere far below, waves exploded against the rocky foundation with rhythmic violence. The lighthouse had stood here since 1843, surviving countless storms. It would survive this one too. She wouldn't. The decision had calcified in her chest. Over the past 6 months, hardening like a pearl around a grain of sand, except there was nothing beautiful about it. Just the slow, suffocating weight of certainty. She'd tried everything else. Therapy via scratchy video calls with a counselor in Bangor who meant well but couldn't understand. Medication that dulled the edges but never touched the core. Prayer, though that felt like shouting into a void that had stopped listening 3 years ago. Tonight, when Ezekiel's full fury hit Saint's End, Mara would simply walk down to the rocks. She'd written the letters yesterday. One to her mother in Sacramento, one to the Coast Guard, one to the church board that had quietly suggested her resignation after the incident. The church one was the shortest. "I'm sorry I wasn't enough." She'd left them on the small kitchen table in her quarters, weighted down by the lighthouse keeper's log. Tomorrow, or maybe the day after, when the storm passed and someone came to check on the lighthouse, they'd find the letters. They'd find her empty rain slicker hanging on its hook. They'd search the rocks and eventually stop searching. People would say she was another casualty of Hurricane Ezekiel. They wouldn't be wrong exactly. They just wouldn't know the hurricane had started 3 years ago in a youth group van heading home from Lake Serenity Bible Camp. Mara opened her eyes and checked her watch. 4:47 p.m. The sun was already disappearing behind the wall of clouds advancing from the southeast. She should go down and make dinner, though she had no appetite. She should double-check the emergency supplies, though it didn't matter. The marine radio on her hip crackled to static life. Saints End Lighthouse, this is Coast Guard Station Portsmouth, do you copy? Mara unclipped the radio with practiced efficiency. Portsmouth, this is Saints End. I copy. Mara, it's Jenkins. The voice belonged to Chief Petty Officer David Jenkins, who'd been her primary contact for 3 years. He was a good man, divorced, father of 2, the kind of person who remembered to ask how you were doing and actually waited for the answer. Mara had perfected the art of lying to him. How are you holding up out there? All secure, Mara said. Lighthouse systems operational, backup generator tested and fueled, emergency supplies stocked. That's not what I asked. Mara watched a seagull fight against the wind, its wings beating furiously just to stay in place. I'm fine, Chief. A pause. Static hissed between them like the ocean below. Mara, we can have a helicopter out there in 40 minutes. This isn't like the nor'easters you've weathered before. Ezekiel is a Category 4, possibly strengthening to a 5. The storm surge alone. I know what a Category 4 means. Then you know staying out there is my job. Mara interrupted. Someone needs to keep the light running. That's why I'm here. Another pause, longer this time. She could picture Jenkins in the station, probably running his hand over his shaved head the way he did when he was frustrated. Other voices murmured in the background. The station preparing for the hurricane, personnel being recalled, emergency protocols being activated. The light has automatic systems, Jenkins said finally. You don't need to be there. The automatic systems fail. You know that. It was true. Just last winter, ice had damaged the photoelectric sensor, and if Mara hadn't manually maintained the light, 2 cargo ships would have run aground on the rocks during a blizzard. Besides, the evacuation order isn't mandatory for Coast Guard personnel. You're not Coast Guard. You're a civilian contractor. Then I'm a civilian choosing to stay at her post. Jenkins sighed, a sound of defeat that crackled through the radio. You're as stubborn as your father was. Mara's throat tightened. Her father, Marcus Castellano, had been a lighthouse keeper too. Not this lighthouse, but the one at Point Mercy, 70 miles south. He died of a heart attack in the lantern room when Mara was 19. Died keeping the light burning during a December storm. Her mother had never forgiven the sea for taking him, had moved as far inland as she could get. Mara had gone the opposite direction. If you change your mind, Jenkins continued, call us. We'll come get you, even in the thick of it. You understand? I understand. Thank you, Chief. Stay safe out there, Mara. I mean it. You too. She clipped the radio back to her belt and stood there for another moment, watching the storm approach. The waves were building now, white-capped and angry, throwing spray 20 feet into the air. A few more hours, and they'd be tall enough to reach the lighthouse gallery where she stood. Mara turned and opened the heavy metal door that led back inside. The staircase spiraled down through the lighthouse's hollow core, iron steps worn smooth by more than a century of footsteps. Her apartment occupied the 3rd floor, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, and a small living area with a space heater and a bookshelf full of novels she'd read and reread until the spines cracked. She descended past it to the 2nd floor, where the backup generator squatted like a mechanical beast, its fuel tank freshly filled. Past the 1st floor entrance hall with its peeling paint and dusty life-saving equipment from the 1960s. went down to the basement storage level, where supplies were kept in waterproof containers. Everything was ready. She'd been preparing all week, though the preparations felt like an elaborate performance, going through the motions, being the responsible keeper until the end. Mara climbed back up to her quarters and lit the propane stove to make coffee. Outside the small kitchen window, darkness was falling early, swallowed by the storm. She poured the coffee into a chipped mug that said, "World's Best Youth Pastor," a gift from 5 years ago that she'd somehow brought with her and couldn't throw away. She sat at the kitchen table next to the 3 letters and wrapped her hands around the mug's warmth. The silence was complete except for the wind, which was no longer whispering. It was beginning to howl. Mara thought about Sophie. She tried not to, had spent 3 years trying not to, but tonight she let herself remember. Sophie Martinez, 16 years old, with braces and a habit of quoting scripture at inappropriate moments. Sophie, who'd been struggling with her parents' divorce and had opened up to Mara about feeling like God wasn't listening to her prayers. Sophie, who'd been swimming in the lake that July afternoon while Mara stood on the shore. Phone pressed to her ear, arguing with Derek about whether they should have a church wedding or something smaller. "I think God's done talking to me," Sophie had said that morning at breakfast, her eyes red from crying. "He never stops talking," Mara had assured her. "Sometimes we just have to listen differently." 6 hours later, Sophie was underwater, and God was silent as a grave. Mara drained her coffee and stood abruptly, needing to move, needing to do something with her hands. She climbed the stairs to the lantern room at the lighthouse's crown. The massive Fresnel lens dominated the circular space, its prismatic glass segments arranged in concentric rings that could magnify a single lamp into a beam visible for 20 miles. She flipped the switches. The lens began to rotate with a mechanical hum, and the light blazed to life, a sweeping beacon cutting through the gathering darkness. One flash every 10 seconds. Saint N's signature pattern, recorded in every nautical chart of the North Atlantic. Mara watched the light spin, mesmerized despite herself. There was something almost holy about it, this persistent declaration of presence, this refusal to let darkness have the final word. Her father had loved this about lighthouses. "We're not just warning ships away from danger," he used to say. "We're telling them they're not alone out there." She wondered if he'd felt alone when his heart gave out. If he'd had time to be afraid. She wondered if Sophie had been afraid in those final moments underwater. The wind slammed against the lantern room with sudden violence, making the glass panels shudder. Mara steadied herself against the lens housing. It was starting. The outer bands of Hurricane Ezekiel, the storm that would, if the forecasts were right, be one of the worst to hit the New England coast in 50 years. Mara descended back to her quarters and changed into warmer clothes. Wool socks, waterproof pants, a thick sweater under her rain slicker. Not because she'd need them for long, just because it seemed wrong to go into the storm unprepared, even if preparation was pointless. She made a simple dinner of canned soup, eating mechanically while the wind screamed outside. The lighthouse groaned around her, its ancient bones protesting. Rain began to hammer the windows like handfuls of thrown gravel. At 8:30 p.m., Mara washed her dishes, dried them, and put them away. She checked the lighthouse systems one final time. Light operational, backup power ready, all hatches secured. She transmitted her final weather report to Portsmouth. Saints End reporting. Hurricane conditions arriving. All systems secure. Keep her remaining on station. She didn't mention that she wouldn't be on station much longer. At 9:15 p.m., Mara put on her rain slicker and opened the door to the outside gallery. The wind nearly tore it from her hands. Rain lashed at her face with stinging force, and the ocean below was invisible in the darkness, except when lightning flickered, revealing mountains of water advancing on the lighthouse. This was it. Time to walk down to the rocks, to let the sea claim what it should have claimed instead of Sophie. But as Mara stepped out onto the gallery, squinting against the rain, something made her stop. A light. A small, flickering light down by the boat landing. That was impossible. No one could approach Saint's End in this weather. Even the Coast Guard wouldn't attempt it now. The boat landing was just a small concrete platform where supplies were delivered in calm weather, already half submerged by the rising tide. Lightning flashed again, and in that brief illumination, Mara saw it clearly. A figure. A person standing on the boat landing, waving their arms. No, Mara whispered. No, but the figure was real. Someone was down there, and the next big wave would sweep them into the sea. Mara's body moved before her mind caught up. She grabbed the emergency spotlight from its mount and aimed it down at the landing. In its beam, she saw a man, drenched, clearly exhausted, clinging to one of the iron posts. Her radio crackled. She'd left it on. A repeat, anyone near Saint's End, emergency distress call from fishing vessel. The transmission dissolved into static. The man looked up at the spotlight. His face pale and desperate, Mara stood frozen, the spotlight shaking in her hands. Not again. She couldn't do this again. She couldn't be responsible for someone else. Couldn't watch someone else die because she wasn't enough. Wasn't fast enough. Wasn't. Another wave crashed over the landing, and the man lost his grip, sliding toward the edge. Damn it. Mara screamed into the wind. She dropped the spotlight and ran. The iron staircase was a spiral of terror in the storm. Mara took the steps two at a time, one hand on the railing, the other clutching a coil of rope she'd grabbed from the emergency locker. Rain poured down the stairwell's central column, making every surface slick. The wind howled through the gaps in the structure. Trying to pull her off balance, she burst through the ground-level door and into the full fury of the hurricane. The wind hit her like a physical blow, nearly knocking her backward. She bent low, fighting forward across the 50 yards of rock and concrete that separated the lighthouse from the boat landing. The spotlight beam from above still illuminated the scene in harsh white light. The man had managed to grab the iron post again, but another wave was building, a massive wall of dark water that would crush him against the concrete or drag him out to sea. "Hold on," Mara screamed, though her voice was instantly shredded by the wind. She reached the landing just as the wave hit. The impact knocked her to her knees, salt water flooding her mouth and nose, the rope nearly torn from her grip. When the water receded, she gasped and looked up, certain the man would be gone. But he was still there, both arms wrapped around the post now, coughing up seawater. Mara tied one end of the rope around her own waist with shaking fingers, then secured the other end to the landing's safety railing, the same railing that was supposed to keep supply deliveries from sliding into the ocean. She crawled forward on her hands and knees, staying low beneath the wind. "Can you move?" she shouted when she got close enough. The man turned his head toward her. Even in the darkness and rain, even with his face contorted by exhaustion, there was something striking about him. Dark hair plastered to his head, a beard, eyes that seemed impossibly calm given the circumstances. "I think so," he called back. His voice was hoarse but steady. "When I say go, you let go of that post and grab my hand. Understand? Don't think. Just move." He nodded. Mara watched the ocean, counting the rhythm of the waves. Her father had taught her this, how to read the sets, how to find the brief lull between the big ones. It was a gamble, but everything about this was a gamble. A wave crashed over them, then another, then a smaller one. Now! Mara lunged forward and grabbed the man's wrist. He released the post and seized her forearm with both hands. For a terrifying second, Mara felt his full weight pulling her toward the edge, the rope around her waist going taut. Then she dug her boots against the concrete and pulled with everything she had. They scrambled backward together, Mara dragging him inch by inch toward the safety railing. Another wave crashed over them, but she held on, her fingers locked around his wrist like a vice. She wouldn't let go. "Not this time!" Not again. They collapsed together against the railing just as a truly massive wave, easily 12 feet high, obliterated the spot where the man had been standing seconds before. The iron post he'd been clinging to bent under the impact, groaning like a living thing. "Move!" Mara shouted. "We have to get inside." She untied the rope from her waist and half dragged, half carried the man across the exposed rock toward the lighthouse door. He was trying to help, his legs working, but he was clearly at the edge of his strength. They staggered together through the wind, leaning on each other, until finally they reached the door. Mara shoved it open and they tumbled inside. She slammed it shut behind them and threw the heavy bolt, then collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. They were in the entrance hall, a circular room with peeling blue paint and a concrete floor. Water dripped from both of them, pooling beneath their feet. The wind still howled outside, but the thick stone walls muffled it to a constant roar rather than a shriek. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands were shaking, from cold, from adrenaline, from the delayed shock of what she'd just done. She'd saved him. Somehow, impossibly, she'd saved him. The man sat slumped against the opposite wall, head down, breathing hard. Now that they were inside and she could actually see him, Mara registered more details. Mid-30s, maybe. Tall, broad-shouldered. He wore a heavy fisherman's sweater that was torn at the shoulder and jeans that were shredded at the knees. No life jacket. His hands were bleeding, rope burns and scrapes from clinging to the post. "Are you hurt?" Mara asked, her voice rough. "Anything broken?" He looked up at her, and again she was struck by those eyes. Dark brown, almost black, but with a depth that seemed to catch the dim emergency lighting and hold it. He studied her for a long moment before answering. "No," he said. "Bruised, exhausted, but not broken. What the hell were you doing out there?" "What boat were you on?" "Fishing vessel out of Gloucester." "The Morning Star," he coughed, wincing. "We were trying to outrun the storm. Didn't make it." Mara stood on shaking legs and moved to the emergency supply cabinet. She pulled out a thermal blanket and a first aid kit, then returned and handed them to him. "The rest of your crew?" "Made it to the life raft when we started taking on water. Coast Guard picked them up about 2 hours ago." He wrapped the blanket around his shoulders. "I got separated. Current brought me here. That didn't make sense. The currents around Saints End ran south and Gloucester was north. But Mara was too exhausted to interrogate the physics of it. A man was alive who should be dead. That was enough impossible for one night. "Can you climb stairs?" she asked. "I think so. My quarters are on the 3rd floor." "We need to get you warm and dry." "Come on." Mara led him to the iron staircase. He moved slowly, gripping the railing, but he made it without collapsing. She took him past the 2nd floor generator room, its engine thrumming reliably, up to her small apartment. The space felt suddenly tiny with another person in it. Mara was used to solitude here, used to the rooms being sized exactly for one. Now a stranger dripped seawater onto her kitchen floor, filling the space with his presence. "Bathroom's there," she said, pointing. "There's a shower. Hot water still works. I'll find you some dry clothes." "Thank you," he said quietly. "You saved my life." Mara turned away, unable to meet his eyes. "Just get warm." While he was in the bathroom, Mara changed into dry clothes in her bedroom, then dug through her storage closet. She'd kept some of her father's old clothes, sweaters, work pants, things she couldn't bring herself to donate. They'd probably fit the stranger well enough. She left them outside the bathroom door and retreated to the kitchen, where she put a kettle on for tea. Her hands were still shaking. She gripped the counter and took deep breaths, trying to center herself. What was she doing? An hour ago, she'd been ready to walk into the ocean. Now she was making tea for a shipwreck survivor. The universe had a sick sense of humor. The bathroom door opened, and the man emerged wearing her father's old gray sweater and work pants. They fit reasonably well. His hair was toweled dry, hanging in damp waves. Without the seawater streaming down his face, he looked almost, she didn't know, distinguished. There was something about him that didn't fit the image of a fisherman from Gloucester. "Better?" she asked. "Much, thank you." He paused in the doorway. "I don't know your name." "Mara Castellano." "I'm the lighthouse keeper, Emmanuel," he said, and held out his hand. She shook it. His grip was warm and firm, his palm calloused. "Emmanuel what?" A slight smile. "Just Emmanuel." My mother had a fondness for meaningful names. The kettle began to whistle. Mara turned and poured 2 mugs of tea, then handed him one. "Sit. You should eat something." She made him a sandwich. Cheese and bread. Simple, but substantial. and watched as he ate with the focused intensity of someone who'd been burning energy they didn't have. While he ate, she used the first aid kit to clean and bandage the worst of the cuts on his hands. "These need to stay clean," she said, wrapping gauze around his palm. "If they get infected out here, I'll be careful," he promised. Outside, the hurricane raged. The lighthouse groaned and creaked, but it held steady. Mara had grown used to these sounds over 3 years, but Emmanuel looked up each time something particularly loud crashed or rattled. "It's holding," Mara assured him. "This lighthouse has weathered worse. How long have you been here?" 3 years. Alone? Something in the way he asked made her defensive. "It's a one-person posting." "That's not what I asked." Mara pulled her hands back, the bandaging complete. "Yes, alone. That's how I prefer it." Emmanuel took a sip of his tea, watching her over the rim of the mug. "Is it? You don't know me?" "No," he agreed. "I don't, but I know what running away looks like." Heat flashed through Mara's chest. "I'm not running away. I'm doing my job, all the way out here, on an island called Saint's End." His voice was gentle, not accusatory, but it still felt like a blade. "Interesting choice for someone who isn't running." Mara stood abruptly. "You should rest. You can take the bedroom. I'll sleep out here on the couch." "I don't want to take your bed. It's not a negotiation. You nearly died tonight. You need actual rest." She moved toward the bedroom door, then paused. "The storm should pass in 36 to 48 hours. When it does, I'll radio the Coast Guard. They'll come get you." "And you?" Emmanuel asked. "Will they come get you too?" "I live here." "That's not the same as staying alive." Mara's breath caught. She turned to face him fully. "What did you say?" Emmanuel stood, moving to the window where rain battered the glass. Lightning flashed, illuminating his profile. "I said that's not the same as staying alive. Living and surviving, they're different things." "You don't know anything about me," Mara said again. But her voice had lost its strength. "I know you climbed down into a hurricane to save a stranger." He turned from the window. "I know you have the reflexes and courage of someone who's saved lives before. And I know you have the eyes of someone who's lost something precious." Mara's throat closed. For a long moment they just stood there, the stranger named Emmanuel and the woman who'd planned to die tonight, while the hurricane tried to tear the world apart around them. "Get some rest," Mara finally managed. "We can talk in the morning." Emmanuel nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mara, for everything." He moved past her into the bedroom and closed the door softly. Mara stood alone in her kitchen, shaking again, but this time not from cold. She moved to the window and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. The lighthouse beam swept past outside, its light cutting through rain and darkness with mechanical persistence. "You saved my life," Emmanuel had said. But she hadn't saved Sophie. Hadn't even tried, not really. She'd frozen, watched, failed, and now the universe had given her a second chance she didn't want and didn't deserve. Mara looked at the 3 letters still sitting on the kitchen table, weighted down by the keeper's log, her suicide notes, her final words. She should throw them away. Emmanuel's arrival had changed everything, complicated everything. She couldn't walk into the ocean now. She was responsible for keeping him alive until the Coast Guard could retrieve him. But Mara didn't throw the letters away. Instead, she left them on the table and moved to the couch, wrapping herself in a blanket. The storm howled, the lighthouse groaned, and somewhere in her bedroom, a stranger who knew too much about her slept in her father's clothes. Mara stared at the ceiling and wondered what kind of cosmic joke had just been played on her. She didn't sleep for a long time. When she finally did, she dreamed of Sophie underwater, blonde hair floating like seaweed, reaching up toward the surface where Mara stood, frozen on the shore, phone still pressed to her ear, Derek's angry voice demanding to know if she was even listening to him. In the dream, Sophie's lips moved, forming words Mara couldn't hear through the water. But Emmanuel stood next to Sophie in the depths, his hand on her shoulder, and he looked up at Mara with those dark, impossible eyes and said clearly, as if the water didn't matter at all, "I was there. You didn't see me." But I was there. Mara woke with a gasp, her heart racing. Sweat cold on her skin, despite the blanket. The clock on the wall read 3:47 a.m. The storm still raged, and from the bedroom, she heard nothing at all. Not breathing, not movement, nothing. Just silence, as complete as a tomb. Mara didn't go back to sleep. She lay on the couch, listening to the hurricane and the silence from her bedroom, until grey dawn light began to filter through the windows. The storm hadn't weakened. If anything, it had intensified. Wind screamed around the lighthouse with a sound like 1,000 voices, and waves crashed against the foundation hard enough to shake the floor. At 6:15 a.m., Mara gave up on rest and made coffee. She moved quietly, trying not to wake Emmanuel, but when she turned from the stove, he was standing in the bedroom doorway. She jumped, nearly dropping her mug. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to startle you." "You're quiet." Mara's heart was still hammering. "I didn't hear the door." Old habit. Emmanuel moved into the kitchen. He looked remarkably well rested for someone who'd nearly drowned 12 hours ago. "Coffee smells good." Mara poured him a mug and handed it over. In the grey morning light, she studied him more carefully. There was something about his face that was hard to pin down. Handsome, certainly, but in a way that seemed almost timeless. Like someone who could have walked out of any era in history and fit right in. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Better than I have any right to." He flexed his bandaged hands. "These barely hurt anymore." That was odd. Rope burns, like those should have been agonizing this morning. But Mara didn't comment on it. Instead, she moved to the weather radio and checked the latest update. Hurricane Ezekiel has strengthened to Category 5, the automated voice announced. Maximum sustained winds of 165 miles per hour. Storm surge of 18 to 22 feet. The eye will make landfall near Portsmouth, Maine at approximately 2 p.m. today. All residents in coastal areas should have evacuated by now. Emergency services are suspended until the storm passes. Mara switched off the radio. "Looks like we're stuck here for at least another day. Maybe 2. Worse places to be stuck," Emmanuel said, looking around the small apartment with what seemed like genuine appreciation. "You've made this comfortable, lived in. It's just temporary. 3 years is a long time for temporary." Mara bristled. "You said you're from Gloucester. What do you fish for?" "Cod mostly, haddock, whatever's running." He sipped his coffee. "But that's not really what you're asking." "What am I asking?" "You're trying to figure out if my story makes sense. If I'm who I say I am." Emmanuel smiled, but there was something in his eyes, not amusement exactly. Understanding, maybe. "You're wondering how I ended up here when the currents should have taken me somewhere else." Mara set down her mug. "Okay, so explain it." "I can't or won't." "Can't? Not in a way you'd find satisfying." He leaned against the counter. "Sometimes we end up exactly where we need to be, even when the path there doesn't make logical sense." "That's not an answer." "No," Emmanuel agreed. "It's not." They stood there in the kitchen, the storm raging outside, tension building between them like electrical charge. Mara wanted to push, to demand real answers, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the calm in his eyes. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the simple fact that she'd saved his life and didn't want to turn this into a confrontation. "I need to check the lighthouse systems," she said finally. "Make sure everything's still operational. I'll come with you. You should rest. I've rested enough." Emmanuel set down his mug. "Besides, I'd like to see how all this works. I've never been inside a lighthouse before." That surprised her. "You're a fisherman who's never been in a lighthouse?" "I work with different kinds of light." It was an odd thing to say, but Mara was too tired to pass it. She led him up the spiral staircase to the lantern room. The climb was harder in the storm. The entire structure swayed slightly with each major gust, and the sound of wind against the glass panels was deafening. But when they reached the top, the view was breathtaking despite the violence. The ocean was a roiling mass of grey and white, waves colliding with each other in chaotic patterns. Rain lashed the window so hard it seemed solid, and the sky was a bruised canvas of purple and black. Lightning fractured the darkness in brilliant veins. Emmanuel stood at the windows, transfixed. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. It's deadly, Mara corrected, moving to check the Fresnel lens. The light was still rotating perfectly, its beam cutting through the storm. This is what kills people. This is what destroys everything it touches. And yet you keep the light burning. That's the job, is it? Emmanuel turned from the window. Or is it something else? A way to keep giving when you think you have nothing left to give. Mara's hand stilled on the lens housing. You don't know me well enough to psychoanalyze me. You're right. I'm sorry. But he didn't look away. Can I ask you something, though? Why did you come down to the landing last night? Because you needed help, but you didn't have to. You could have stayed inside, radioed the Coast Guard, let them handle it. They couldn't have reached you in time, so you risked your life for a stranger. Emmanuel moved closer, his footsteps echoing on the iron floor. Why would someone who wants to die do that? Mara felt the blood drain from her face. What? The letters on your kitchen table? I saw them last night before I went to bed. His voice was gentle, not accusatory. One to your mother, one to the Coast Guard, one to a church. They're weighted down like you wanted to make sure they'd be found. You had no right. You're right. I didn't, but I saw them anyway. Emmanuel stopped a few feet away from her. So I'll ask again, why would someone who planned to walk into the ocean climb down into a hurricane to save a stranger? Mara's breath came in short gasps. She wanted to be angry, wanted to throw him out, but the anger wouldn't come. Instead, something else rose up, something raw and jagged that she'd been pushing down for 3 years. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know. My body just moved. I saw you down there and I couldn't let you die, but you could let yourself die. That's different. Why? Because I deserve it. The words exploded out of her. Because I killed someone, and I deserve whatever punishment. She stopped, hand over her mouth, shocked at her own outburst. Emmanuel watched her with those impossibly calm eyes. Tell me about Sophie. Mara's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the iron floor, her back against the lens housing. How do you know about Sophie? You said her name in your sleep last night. Called out for her. That made sense. Nightmares, of course. But it didn't explain the weight of his gaze, the way he looked at her like he could see straight through to her bones. I don't want to talk about it, Mara said. I think you do. Emmanuel sat down across from her, cross-legged on the floor, like they were having a casual conversation instead of being trapped in a hurricane. I think you've been wanting to talk about it for 3 years, but there's no one here to listen. There's a reason there's no one here. Yes, you're punishing yourself. He said it matter-of-factly, without judgment. You think if you suffer enough, somehow it will balance the scales. Make up for what happened. Mara laughed bitterly. You sound like my therapist. Does your therapist know you're planning suicide? I stopped seeing her 2 months ago. That's not an answer. Mara pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Outside, the storm howled. The lighthouse swayed. The light kept turning, indifferent to human suffering. Sophie was 16, she heard herself say. She was in my youth group. Struggling with her parents' divorce, questioning her faith, all the normal teenage crisis stuff. But she was smart, so smart. She wanted to be a marine biologist, study dolphins. Emmanuel listened without interrupting. We went on a summer camping trip. Lake Serenity Bible Camp. It was supposed to be a week of bonding, spiritual growth, all that. Mara's voice went flat, reciting facts. The last day we had free time at the lake. I was on the shore supervising, except I wasn't supervising. I was on the phone with my fiancé, Derek, arguing about wedding details. She paused, the memory sharp as broken glass. He was angry because I'd invited too many people from the church. Said it was supposed to be intimate, not a congregation. I was trying to explain that these kids were my family, that I couldn't not invite them. We were going back and forth, getting louder, and her voice cracked. I wasn't watching the water, someone called out. One of the other kids said Sophie had been under too long. I turned and she was just floating there, face down. Her hair spreading out like... Mara couldn't finish the sentence. Emmanuel waited. I froze, Mara continued. I just stood there with the phone in my hand, staring. Someone else dove in. Someone else pulled her out. Someone else started CPR. I just stood there, frozen, while Derek's voice kept coming through the phone. Are you even listening to me?
Mara.
They got her to the hospital. She was on life support for 3 days. Then her parents made the decision to let her go. Mara wiped her eyes roughly. The church board said it wasn't my fault. An accident. Could have happened to anyone. But I saw the way they looked at me. I heard the whispers. She wasn't watching. She was on her phone. If she'd been paying attention. Derek left me 2 weeks after the funeral. Said he couldn't marry someone who'd let a kid die. Said he'd never be able to trust me with our own children someday. Mara laughed without humor. At least he was honest. So you came here, Emmanuel said quietly. So I came here. To keep a light burning for people I'll never meet. To make sure no one else dies on my watch. She looked up at him. And to wait until I had the courage to finish what I started. To pay the debt I owe. Emmanuel was quiet for a long moment. The lighthouse groaned around them. Rain hammered the glass. Can I tell you a story? He finally asked. Does it have a point? All stories have a point. Whether we understand it right away is another question. He shifted, getting comfortable. 2,000 years ago, there was a man who had 12 friends. Close friends. He'd spent 3 years with them, teaching them, sharing his life with them. They were his inner circle. Mara frowned. Is this a Jesus story? Just listen, Emmanuel said gently. One night, this man went to a garden to pray. He was facing the worst night of his life. He knew he was going to die, knew it would be brutal and agonizing, and he was terrified. The text says he was overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Emmanuel's voice was soft but intense, like he was describing something he'd witnessed personally. He brought his 3 closest friends with him, asked them just to stay awake, to sit with him while he prayed. That's all. Just be present. Emmanuel paused. They fell asleep. All 3 of them, while he was in agony, sweating blood, literally blood, they slept. Mara felt something twist in her chest. He woke them up. Asked again, can't you stay awake with me for 1 hour? They said they would. They fell asleep again. Emmanuel leaned forward. This happened 3 times. 3 times his friends failed him in his darkest hour. And then, later that night, one of them betrayed him for money. Another denied even knowing him. The rest ran away and hid when he was arrested. What's your point? Mara asked, though she thought she knew. My point is that everyone fails. Everyone freezes when they shouldn't. Falls asleep when they should stay awake. Runs when they should stand firm. Emmanuel's eyes held hers. The people closest to God in history, the ones in the inner circle, they failed him when he needed them most. And yet he forgave them, loved them anyway. Didn't demand they spend the rest of their lives punishing themselves. That's different, Mara said. They didn't kill anyone. Their failure led directly to his death. If they'd stayed awake, if they'd been alert, maybe things would have gone differently. Maybe he wouldn't have been arrested. Emmanuel shook his head, but he didn't blame them. He understood they were human, weak, afraid. I'm not them. No, you're not. You're Mara, who froze for 30 seconds 3 years ago and has been crucifying herself ever since. Emmanuel's voice was firm now. But here's what you're missing. That man in the garden, when he was dying, when he was most alone, most abandoned, he cried out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Do you know what that means? Mara shook her head. It means even God knows what it feels like to be alone in the worst moment. Even God knows what it feels like to fail, to be abandoned, to suffer when no one is watching. Emmanuel's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. God sat in the storm before you did, Mara. Every storm you're facing, the guilt, the loneliness, the feeling that you failed beyond redemption, he's already been there, already felt it, already carried it. Tears were streaming down Mara's face now. Then where was he? Where was he when Sophie was drowning? Where was he when I froze? Right there, Emmanuel said simply. Right there in the water with her. Right there on the shore with you, suffering with both of you. Carrying what you couldn't carry alone. That's not enough, Mara choked out. That doesn't bring her back. No, it doesn't. Emmanuel reached out slowly and took her hand. His grip was warm and solid. But it means you're not alone in this. You never have been. They sat there on the floor of the lantern room while the hurricane raged around them. Mara crying for the first time in months, Emmanuel holding her hand in silence. Above them, the Fresnel lens continued its rotation, the light sweeping out across the storm. A light in the darkness, a beacon for the lost, a declaration that someone was keeping watch. Even in the worst of the tempest, they stayed in the lantern room for another hour, not talking much, just sitting with the storm. Eventually, Mara's tears dried and the rawness in her chest settled into something almost like peace, not comfort. Exactly, but a quietness she hadn't felt in years. Emmanuel didn't push her to talk more, didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. He just sat with her, his presence steady as the lighthouse itself, until finally Mara stood and wiped her face. "I should check the generator," she said, her voice hoarse. "Make sure we have enough fuel. I'll help." They descended the spiral staircase together. The hurricane was at its peak now. The eye wouldn't reach them for another few hours, according to the weather radio. The entire lighthouse shuddered with each gust, and outside the small windows, the world was nothing but grey water and darker grey sky. On the second floor, the generator chugged reliably in its housing. Mara checked the fuel gauge, the oil level, the exhaust system. Everything was functioning perfectly. Emmanuel watched her work with quiet attention, occasionally handing her a tool before she asked for it, as if he knew what she needed. "You're good at this," he observed. "I've had 3 years to practice." "No, I mean you have the instincts for it, like it's in your blood." Mara tightened a bolt on the exhaust coupling. "My father was a lighthouse keeper, Point Mercy, down the coast. I grew up around this equipment. He taught you well. He taught me that keeping the light burning matters more than anything else. That it's not just about safety, it's about hope." Mara set down her wrench. "He died keeping a light burning during a storm. Heart attack in the lantern room. They found him the next morning, slumped against the lens. The light was still on." "You loved him very much." "I did. He was..." Mara paused, searching for words. "Steady, unshakable. He believed in things with his whole heart, God, family, duty. No matter what happened, he had this faith that things would work out the way they were supposed to. And you used to believe that too." It wasn't a question. Mara nodded anyway. "Before Sophie. Before I realized that sometimes things don't work out. Sometimes people just die and there's no reason, no purpose. Just random tragedy." Emmanuel was quiet for a moment, then said, "Or maybe the purpose isn't always visible from where we're standing. Maybe we're too close to see the whole picture." "Don't," Mara said sharply. "Don't try to make Sophie's death into some grand plan. Some lesson I was supposed to learn. She was 16 years old with her whole life ahead of her. I'm not saying her death was planned or purposeful," Emmanuel replied carefully. "I'm saying that even in the worst tragedies, there can be threads of redemption we don't see right away. Small lights in the darkness, like what? What possible redemption could there be? Like last night. Like you climbing down into a hurricane to save a drowning man, even though you were planning to die yourself." Emmanuel met her eyes. "Maybe Sophie's death taught you something about the preciousness of life, about how much every moment matters. And maybe that's why your body moved before your mind could stop it when you saw me on that landing." Mara wanted to argue, but the words caught in her throat. She turned away, busying herself with coiling a length of cable that didn't need coiling. "We should eat something," she said instead. "Lunch?" They went back up to the 3rd floor. Mara made sandwiches while Emmanuel set the small table. The domesticity of it was surreal. 2 people preparing a meal together while a Category 5 hurricane tried to tear the world apart outside. Like they were in a bubble outside of time. They ate in comfortable silence. Mara found herself sneaking glances at Emmanuel, still trying to figure him out. He ate with deliberate attention, like someone who was truly present in each moment rather than rushing through. His hands moved with a grace that seemed at odds with his story of being a fisherman. No roughness, despite the calluses. No nervousness or fidgeting. "Can I ask you something?" Mara said finally. "Of course, last night you said you got separated from your crew, that they made it to the life raft and the Coast Guard picked them up." "Yes, but you said the current brought you here." "To Saint's End." Mara leaned forward. "The currents don't flow this direction from where a Gloucester boat would have gone down. They flow south and east, away from here. Emmanuel took a sip of water. You're right. So how did you end up here? I told you before, sometimes we end up exactly where we need to be, even when the path doesn't make sense. That's still not an answer. No, Emmanuel agreed. It's not, Mara set down her sandwich. Who are you really? I'm exactly who I said I am, Emmanuel, a man who was drowning and needed help. But that's not all you are. Emmanuel smiled, but there was something sad in it. None of us are just one thing, Mara. We're all more complicated than the stories we tell about ourselves. Before Mara could press further, a sound cut through the storm, a sharp metallic clang from below. She was on her feet instantly, Emmanuel right behind her. What was that? He asked. I don't know. Stay here. Not a chance. They hurried down the stairs together. The sound had come from the ground level near the entrance. When they reached it, Mara's blood went cold. The door was shuddering in its frame. Something was slamming against it from outside. Not the wind, but something heavier, more deliberate. Another massive clang, and the bolt rattled. Is it the storm surge? Emmanuel asked. No, the water's not high enough yet to reach the door. Mara moved closer, listening. Another impact, and this time she recognized it. Debris. Something big got picked up by the wind and is battering the door. Will it hold? It should. That door is solid steel, 3 inches thick. But even as she said it, Mara heard the groan of metal under stress. The hinges were old, original to the 1843 construction. We need to brace it. They worked quickly, hauling storage crates and old equipment to stack against the door. Emmanuel moved with surprising strength, lifting things that should have required 2 people. Within 10 minutes, they'd built a makeshift barrier. The impacts continued, but the door held. Good, Mara said, breathing hard. A new sound cut her off. A deep, resonant boom that came from outside and below, followed by a grinding noise that rattled through the entire structure. Emmanuel's face went pale. What is that? Mara was already running. She flew down the stairs to the basement level, the foundation level, built directly into the rock. Water was seeping under the door at the bottom of the stairs, spreading across the concrete floor. No, 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 Mara muttered, splashing through the water to check the walls. A crack had opened in the eastern wall about 6 inches wide, and seawater was pouring through it with each wave impact. Damn it! Emmanuel appeared behind her. How bad? Bad. The foundation must have shifted. The storm surge is getting through. Mara spun, calculating. If this keeps up, we'll have 3 feet of water down here in an hour. That'll short out the backup systems. We'll lose power. What do we do? Sandbags. We have sandbags in storage. Mara pointed to a stack against the far wall. We need to pack that crack, then build a barrier to keep the water from spreading. They worked for the next hour in water that rose steadily to their ankles, then their shins. Mara directed while Emmanuel hauled sandbags, his strength seemingly inexhaustible. They packed the crack as tightly as they could, then built a low wall to redirect the water toward the drainage grate. It wasn't perfect, but it slowed the flooding to a manageable trickle. By the time they finished, they were both soaked and exhausted. Mara checked the backup electrical panel, still dry, still functioning. They'd bought themselves time. Come on, she said. Let's get dry again. Back in her quarters, Mara stripped off her wet outer clothes and handed Emmanuel a towel. He dried his face and hands, then moved to the window while she changed in the bedroom. When she emerged, he was staring out at the storm with an intensity that made her pause. What is it? She asked. The wind is shifting, Emmanuel said quietly. The eye is close. He was right. The hurricane's roar had changed pitch, becoming a higher, sharper scream. Mara checked her watch. 1:45 p.m. The eye was scheduled to pass over them around 2:00. We'll have maybe 30 to 40 minutes of calm, she explained. Then the backside of the storm hits, sometimes worse than the front. Will the lighthouse hold? It's held for over 180 years. It'll hold today, but even as she said it, Mara felt doubt creeping in. The foundation crack, the battering the door was taking, the sheer force of Ezekiel. This was testing the lighthouse in ways it had never been tested before. At 2:03 p.m., the wind stopped. The silence was shocking. After hours of constant roaring, the sudden quiet felt wrong, oppressive. Mara moved to the window. The sky above was blue, impossibly blue, as the eye of the hurricane passed over them. "We should check the damage," she said. Emmanuel nodded, and they descended together to the ground level. Mara unbolted the door and pushed it open. The world outside was devastated. The boat landing was completely destroyed, the concrete platform shattered into chunks. The safety railing had been torn away entirely. Debris littered the rocks, pieces of boats, fishing equipment, even a street sign from some distant town. The water was still high, but eerily calm in the eye's silence. And there, impossibly, sitting upright on the rocks 50 yards from the lighthouse, was a small fishing boat, intact, undamaged, as if someone had simply parked it there. Mara stared at it. "That's the Morning Star," Emmanuel said quietly. "Your boat?" "Yes." Mara turned to look at him. "You said it capsized, that it was taking on water, that your crew abandoned ship." "I did say that, but that boat looks perfect." Mara's voice rose. "There's no damage, no signs of capsizing. It's sitting there like someone just sailed it up and parked it on the rocks." Emmanuel didn't respond. Mara felt something cold spreading through her chest. "You lied to me." "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you the whole truth." "What's the difference?" "The difference is that you weren't ready to hear the whole truth last night." Emmanuel turned to face her fully. "You're barely ready now." "Ready for what?" "What truth?" Mara took a step back. "Who are you, really?" Before Emmanuel could answer, a new sound split the air, a distress signal coming from Mara's radio. She'd left it inside, but the sound was clear even at this distance. "Mayday, Mayday, this is the cruise ship Atlantic Princess. We are taking on water, 37 miles northeast of Portland, requesting immediate assistance." Mara's blood turned to ice. The Atlantic Princess was one of the biggest cruise ships on the eastern seaboard. Capacity, 3,000 passengers. She ran back inside, Emmanuel behind her. She grabbed the radio from the kitchen table. "Atlantic Princess, this is Saints End Lighthouse. I copy your mayday. What is your situation?" The response was frantic, nearly drowned out by screaming in the background. "Saints End. We lost power in the first half of the storm. We're adrift. The backside is going to hit us in less than 30 minutes, and we have no propulsion." "Repeat, no propulsion?" The transmission cut off. Mara grabbed the weather charts from her desk, spreading them out. She plotted the ship's reported position and felt her stomach drop. "They're drifting straight toward the Widow's Teeth," she said. "The reef system 3 miles north of here. If they hit that without power, they'll break apart," Emmanuel finished. 3,000 people. Mara stared at the charts. The lighthouse beacon was powerful, but the Atlantic Princess had no power to navigate even if they saw it. They needed a closer light, something to warn them before they reached the reef. Her eyes went to the window, to the boat sitting impossibly undamaged on the rocks outside. "No," she whispered. "Yes," Emmanuel said quietly. "That's insane. The eye will pass in 20 minutes. The backside of the storm will kill me before I get halfway there. Not if you leave right now. Not if someone goes with you." Emmanuel moved to stand beside her. "You're a lighthouse keeper, Mara. Your job isn't just keeping the light here. It's bringing light wherever it's needed." "I can't," Mara said, but her voice had no conviction because she could. She was possibly the only person who could. And 3,000 people were about to die if she didn't try. Emmanuel put his hand on her shoulder. "You froze once, 3 years ago, and you've been punishing yourself ever since." His voice was gentle but firm. "This is your chance to move, to choose, to be the person you were always meant to be." Mara looked at him, and in his eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. Not just compassion or encouragement, recognition, like he'd known from the moment he arrived that it would come to this. That this was why he was here. "Who are you?" she whispered again. Emmanuel smiled. "Someone who believes in you. Someone who's been waiting for you to believe in yourself." The radio crackled again. More screaming. More panic. Mara took a deep breath. "Okay," she said. Okay, let's go save 3,000 people. They had 17 minutes. Mara grabbed her emergency kit, flares, rope, a waterproof flashlight, and a handheld marine radio. Emmanuel was already moving toward the door, but she caught his arm. Wait, if we're doing this, we do it smart. She pulled out a laminated chart from her desk drawer. The Widow's Teeth Reef extends in a crescent shape, 3 miles north-northwest. If the Atlantic Princess is drifting from the northeast, they'll hit the eastern edge first. Here, she pointed to a spot on the chart where the reef came closest to the surface. We need to position the boat here, between them and the reef, with every light we have blazing. Give them something to steer away from if they can get partial power back, and if they can't. Then we use the radio to guide them through the only deep channel. It's narrow, maybe 200 feet wide, but a ship that size can fit if they're careful. Mara looked up at him. This is going to be close. The eye won't last much longer, and once the back wall hits, then we don't waste time talking about it. Emmanuel moved to the door. Let's go. They ran across the rocks to where the Morning Star sat impossibly intact. Up close, the boat looked even more pristine. A 30-foot fishing vessel with a small wheelhouse and an open deck. The paint wasn't even scratched. Mara climbed aboard, Emmanuel right behind her. The boat had fuel, the engine turned over on the first try, and all the navigation lights worked perfectly. It was as if the boat had been prepared specifically for this moment. How? Mara breathed, staring at the fully functional controls. Does it matter right now? Emmanuel asked. He was right. Questions could wait. 3,000 lives couldn't. Mara checked her watch. 14 minutes until the eye passed. She fired up the engine, and Emmanuel cast off the lines. Lines that somehow had been tied to rocks that shouldn't have been able to hold a boat. The Morning Star slid into the water as smoothly as if they'd launched from a proper dock. The ocean in the eye of the hurricane was surreal. The swells were still massive, 15, 20 feet, but they were organized, rolling rather than chaotic. The sky above was that impossible blue, ringed by walls of black clouds on all sides. It felt like being at the bottom of a well, with the whole world closing in above them. Mara opened the throttle, and the boat leaped forward. Emmanuel braced himself in the doorway of the wheelhouse, scanning the horizon. The wind was picking up again. The eye was shrinking as it moved past them. There! Emmanuel pointed northeast. Mara saw it. The Atlantic Princess, a massive white shape listing badly to port, dead in the water. Even from 2 miles away, she could see people crowding the deck rails. Tiny figures in orange life jackets. So many people. Radio them, Emmanuel said. Mara grabbed the handheld. Atlantic Princess, this is the motor vessel Morning Star. We are approaching your position from the south. Do you copy? Static. Then a voice, male, exhausted. Morning Star, this is Captain Richardson of the Atlantic Princess. Thank God, who are you? Lighthouse keeper from Saint's End. Captain, what's your status? We've got a hull breach on the port side, flooding in 3 compartments. Main engines are completely offline. We got the auxiliary generator running about 5 minutes ago, but it's not enough to power propulsion. We've got steering, but no thrust. Mara's mind raced. Can you drop anchor? Already tried. We're over the continental shelf here, water's too deep. The anchor won't reach bottom. Captain, you're drifting toward the Widow's Teeth Reef system. At your current speed, you'll hit it in... She checked the chart. Approximately 18 minutes. A pause, then, oh Jesus, there's a deep channel through the reef, but it's narrow. I'm going to position my boat as a reference point. When I tell you, you need to steer hard to starboard. The channel runs north-south. If you can stay in it, you'll clear the reef. With no propulsion, we're at the mercy of the current. Then we pray the current cooperates. Mara looked at Emmanuel, who nodded. Captain, the backside of the hurricane is going to hit in about 10 minutes. Is everyone secured? As secured as they can be. We've got 3,700 souls on this ship, including crew. Richardson's voice cracked. Most of them are in their cabins, but we've got about 400 on the open decks who refuse to go below. 400 people on the deck when the back wall hit. They'd be swept overboard like leaves. Tell them to get inside now, Mara ordered. The backside is going to be worse than what you've already been through. Already trying. Some of them think the eye means it's over. Mara brought the morning. Star around in a wide arc, heading for the position she'd marked on the chart. The cruise ship loomed larger as they approached. A floating city, helpless and drifting. She could see faces now at the railings, could hear shouting carried across the water. Behind them, to the south, the wall of clouds was advancing. The backside of Ezekiel coming like a freight train. Emmanuel, Mara said, in the storage locker behind you, there should be emergency flares. Get them ready. He opened the locker and pulled out a box of marine flares, the kind that burned bright red and could be seen for miles. How many? All of them. We're going to light up the channel like a runway. They reached the position Mara had marked. She cut the engine and let the boat drift, then turned on every light the Morning Star had. Running lights, spotlights, even the cabin lights. Emmanuel began setting off flares, dropping them in the water at precise intervals, Mara called out. The effect was dramatic. A line of brilliant red lights appeared in the darkening water, marking the safe channel through the reef. Atlantic Princess, this is Morning Star, Mara called into the radio. Do you see our lights? We see you. We're about a quarter mile north of your position. That's good. You're already lined up with the channel. Just maintain your current heading. Don't let the current push you east or west. Easier said than done with no engines. The wind was building now, the howling returning. The eye was passing. Mara checked her watch. 5 minutes, maybe less, until the back wall hit with full force. The Atlantic Princess drifted closer. From this distance, Mara could see the damage, a massive gash in the port hull, water pouring out of it with each roll of the ship. The vessel was sitting lower in the water than it should be, taking on water faster than the pumps could handle. They're not going to make it through, Emmanuel said quietly, watching the ship's approach. Yes, they will. Mara, look at the reef. He pointed to the east, where white water marked the widow's teeth. The waves were already building there, crashing over the submerged rocks with explosive force. Even if they stay in the channel, one wave could push them onto the reef. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. Mara grabbed the rope from her emergency kit. When they get level with us, I'm going to pull alongside. We'll tie up to them and use our engine to help keep them centered in the channel. Emmanuel stared at her. This boat weighs maybe 15 tons. That ship weighs 90,000 tons. Our engine won't make any difference. It will make enough difference. Mara met his eyes. You said this was my chance to move, to choose. Well, I'm choosing. We don't leave 3,000 people to die because the math doesn't work out perfectly. A smile spread across Emmanuel's face, not amusement, but something else. Pride, maybe, or recognition that she'd finally understood something important. Okay, he said, let's do it. The Atlantic Princess drew level with them. Up close, it was overwhelming. A wall of white steel rising 7 stories out of the water. Faces stared down from the railings. People were screaming, some in panic, some cheering that help had arrived. Mara brought the Morning Star alongside, matching speed with the drifting cruise ship. Emmanuel threw a line up to the deck, where crew members caught it and secured it to a cleat. He tied off their end, and suddenly the 2 vessels were connected. The tiny fishing boat tethered to the massive cruise liner, like a child holding its mother's hand. "This is insane!" someone shouted from above. "Just keep steering straight," Mara shouted back. She pushed the throttle forward, and the Morning Star's engine roared. The little boat pulled against the rope, and impossibly Mara felt the cruise ship's drift slow slightly. Not much, but enough. The reef was on both sides of them now. Through the water, Mara could see the dark shapes of rocks just below the surface, waiting to tear open the Atlantic Princess's hull. The channel between them was exactly as narrow as the chart had indicated, maybe 200 feet of safe water, with death on either side. And then the back wall hit. The wind slammed into them with the force of a physical blow. The Morning Star heeled over violently, rope snapping taut. Rain exploded across the water, so thick Mara couldn't see 10 feet in front of her. Lightning cracked overhead, thunder following instantly. "Hold on!" Emmanuel grabbed the wheelhouse doorframe with both hands. A wave, 25 feet tall, maybe 30, rolled toward them from the east. Mara saw it coming and knew they were finished. A wave that size would push both vessels onto the western edge of the reef. "No," she whispered. "Not now. Not when we're this close." Emmanuel moved to stand beside her. He didn't grab anything for support. Just stood there, perfectly balanced despite the boat's violent motion, and looked at the wave. "Be still," he said quietly. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but something in it made Mara's skin prickle. The wave reached them and split. It was impossible. Waves didn't do that. But this one did, dividing around the Atlantic Princess like water around a stone, flowing harmlessly past on both sides and reforming behind them. Mara stared, her hands frozen on the wheel. "Keep going," Emmanuel said. "We're almost through." She did. The Morning Star pulled against its tether, its small engine making an impossible difference, and the Atlantic Princess stayed centered in the channel. Another wave came, and again it split around them. Then another. The reef was a blur of white water on both sides, death waiting just yards away. But the channel held, the lights held, and somehow, impossibly, both vessels held their course. And then they were through. The water deepened, the reef fell behind them, and the Atlantic Princess was in safe water. A ragged cheer went up from the people on deck. "Morning Star, this is Captain Richardson. I don't know what you just did or how you did it, but you saved every soul on this ship." His voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you." Mara realized she was shaking. "Can you make it to Portsmouth on auxiliary power? It'll take us 6 hours, but yes, we'll make it." A pause. "Keeper, you should come aboard. That storm's only going to get worse." Mara looked at the Morning Star, at Emmanuel standing beside her like he hadn't just watched physics bend around his quiet command. At the lighthouse, barely visible now through the rain, its beacon still faithfully turning. "Negative, Captain. I have a lighthouse to get back to." She smiled despite her exhaustion. "Someone has to keep the light burning." "Understood. God bless you, Keeper." The crew above cast off their line, and the Atlantic Princess began to pull away, limping toward Portsmouth at a crawl. Faces lined the railings, people waving, crying, holding up phones to take pictures of the tiny fishing boat that had saved them. Mara turned the Morning Star south, back toward Saint's End. The storm was fully upon them now, as bad as it had been before the eye. Worse, maybe. But Mara navigated through it with steady hands, following the lighthouse beacon that cut through the rain like a promise. Emmanuel stood beside her silent, watching the way ahead. "Those waves," Mara said after a long moment. "They split around us. Yes, that's not possible, and yet it happened." Mara gripped the wheel tighter. "Who are you, Emmanuel?" He turned to look at her, and in the lightning's flash, his eyes seemed to hold depths no human eyes should contain. "I think you know. You've known since I told you that story about the garden. About the man who sat alone in the storm." Mara's breath caught. "That's not possible." "You keep saying that word, possible." Emmanuel smiled gently. "Mara, you just used a 15-ton boat to guide a 90,000-ton ship through an impossible channel in a Category 5 hurricane. You just watched waves split around you like the Red Sea, and you're still saying things aren't possible. I don't understand." "You don't have to understand." "Not yet." He reached out and steadied the wheel as a wave hit them. "Right now, you just need to get us home. Then we'll talk." The lighthouse was closer now, its beams sweeping across them with perfect regularity. One flash every 10 seconds. A heartbeat in the darkness. Mara aimed for it and didn't ask any more questions. Some truths were too big to be spoken in the middle of a storm. They had to be discovered. In the quiet that came after, they made it back to Saint's End as the hurricane began its final assault. Mara guided the morning, Star as close to the rocks as she dared. Then she and Emmanuel abandoned ship, jumping onto the broken remains of the boat landing as waves tried to pull them back. They scrambled across the slick stone, reached the lighthouse door, and tumbled inside just as a wave crashed over the spot where they'd been standing. Mara slammed the door and threw the bolt. They stood in the entrance hall, dripping and gasping, while the storm screamed its fury outside. "We made it," Mara said, disbelieving. "You made it," Emmanuel corrected. "You chose to move when it mattered. You saved 3,700 lives tonight." Mara, she looked at him, this stranger who wasn't a stranger, who had appeared in her darkest hour with impossible timing and even more impossible knowledge. Water dripped from his hair, his borrowed clothes, but he stood with perfect calm, like someone who'd never doubted the outcome. "Tell me," Mara said. "No more riddles, no more parables. Tell me who you are." Emmanuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved past her, climbing the spiral staircase. Mara followed, past the generator room, past her quarters, all the way up to the lantern room where the Fresnel lens spun faithfully. He stood at the windows, looking out at the storm. Lightning illuminated his profile, strong, timeless, sorrowful, and joyful all at once. 3 years ago, he said quietly, a 16-year-old girl drowned in a lake, and you've believed ever since that you were alone in that moment. That I abandoned you? Mara's throat closed. "Don't!" "I was there, Mara." Emmanuel turned to face her. "I was in the water with Sophie when she slipped under. I held her in those final moments. She wasn't alone. She wasn't afraid. She called out to me and I answered." Tears spilled down Mara's cheeks. "Then why didn't you save her?" "Because her time was complete. Not because she deserved to die, not as punishment, but because every life has a beginning and an end, and hers reached that end that day." His voice was infinitely gentle. "But your story wasn't finished. You had more living to do, more choosing, more becoming." "I froze," Mara whispered. "I failed her. You're human. Humans freeze. They fall asleep in gardens when they should stay awake. They deny knowing me when they're afraid. They run away when things get hard." Emmanuel stepped closer. "But I don't love you because you're perfect. I love you because you're mine. And nothing, not failure, not guilt, not even death, can separate you from that love." Mara sank to her knees on the iron floor. "I don't deserve it. No one does. That's what makes it grace." Emmanuel knelt beside her. "Mara, do you remember what I said in the garden, when I was facing the worst night of my life?" She shook her head. "I said, 'Not my will, but yours be done.' I chose to trust even when I couldn't see the purpose, even when I was terrified, even when I felt completely alone." He took her hands in his. "Tonight you made the same choice. You couldn't see how it would work out. You were terrified, but you moved anyway. You trusted that your life still had purpose." "The waves," Mara said, "they split around us because I was with you. I've always been with you, Mara, in the water with Sophie, on the shore when you froze, in this lighthouse during 3 years of isolation, in the hurricane tonight." Emmanuel smiled. "I sat in every storm before you did, and I'll sit in every storm that comes after." The lighthouse groaned around them. The wind howled. But in the lantern room, wrapped in the steady rotation of the light, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. Not the absence of pain, not the erasure of guilt or grief, but the deep, bone-level certainty that she wasn't alone, had never been alone, would never be alone. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you live." Emmanuel stood, helping her to her feet. "You keep the light burning because that's your gift, but you stop punishing yourself. You stop believing that suffering long enough will somehow earn forgiveness." He cupped her face in his hands. "You're already forgiven, Mara. You've been forgiven since before you asked. I don't know how to do that, how to forgive myself. Start by accepting that you're loved. The rest will come." He released her and stepped back. "The storm is passing. By morning, it will be over. The Coast Guard will come check on you. Will you still be here?" Emmanuel's smile was sad and beautiful. "I've never left. But you won't see me the way you see me now. Not for a while. I don't want you to go. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be in every sunrise you watch from this lighthouse. In every ship you guide to safety. In every moment you choose to move instead of freeze. He moved toward the stairs. You're not alone, Mara. You never were. Wait. Mara reached for him, but he was already descending, his footsteps echoing on the iron stairs. She followed, racing down the spiral, but when she reached the ground floor, the entrance hall was empty. The door was still bolted from the inside. No one had left, but Emmanuel was gone. Mara stood in the empty hall, breathing hard, and then she understood. She climbed back up to her quarters and looked at the kitchen table. The 3 letters, her suicide notes, were gone. In their place, carved into the wooden surface of the table in elegant script, were 6 words: "The hurricane passed." By dawn, the wind had dropped to normal autumn gusts, and weak sunlight filtered through breaking clouds. Mara stood on the gallery, looking out at the devastated landscape. The boat landing was destroyed. Debris littered the rocks for 100 yards in every direction. The morning star was gone, as if it had never existed, but the lighthouse stood. The light still turned, and Mara Castellano, lighthouse keeper, child of God, forgiven and loved, stood with it. At noon, a Coast Guard helicopter appeared, Chief Jenkins radioing ahead. "Mara, you still with us?" She smiled, tasting salt air and possibility. "I'm here, Chief, still keeping the light. Thank God. Listen, we heard the craziest story. Something about a lighthouse keeper in a fishing boat guiding the Atlantic Princess through the widow's teeth last night." Mara looked at the empty space where the morning star had been. "I had help." "Well, whoever helped you, the captain of that cruise ship is calling you a miracle. Says you saved 3,700 lives. Just doing my job. Your job is keeping the lighthouse running, not performing impossible rescues in Category 5 hurricanes." Jenkins paused. "Mara, are you okay? Really okay?" She thought about Sophie, about 3 years of guilt and isolation, about Emmanuel's words, "You're already forgiven." "Yeah, Chief," she said softly. "I think I'm going to be." 6 months later, Mara sat in the lantern room, watching the spring sun set over calm waters. She'd stayed at Saint's End, but things had changed. She'd reconnected with her mother, started therapy again, even begun writing letters to Sophie's parents, letters she might never send. But that helped her process and heal. The lighthouse still needed a keeper. But now Mara kept it for the right reasons, not to punish herself, but to serve, to bring light into darkness, to be a beacon for the lost. On her desk in the quarters below sat a new journal. The first entry, written in her own hand, read, "Today I learned that God doesn't just understand our storms because He's omniscient. He understands because He lived them. He sat in the storm before I did, in a garden, on a cross, in a tomb. And because He survived those storms and walked out into resurrection, I can survive mine too. I'm not alone. I never was. The light remains." Mara smiled, closed the journal, and watched as the Fresnel lens began its nightly rotation, sending its beam out across the darkening waters, one flash every 10 seconds, a heartbeat, a promise, a light that would never go out.